The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Leslie McGee with the Adult Protective Services Technical Assistance Resource Center. Welcome to today's presentation, Data Dashboards, an Effective Tool for Tracking and Sharing Key Data Elements. We have a large slate of speakers today from the APS TARC and the states of North Carolina, Washington, and Oklahoma. Our presenters today are Carl Urban, Carrie Perez, Sarah Richardson, Dave Beecham, Jeremy Buchanan, and Reza Zainalpour. Okay. Before we get started, I want to address a few housekeeping items. NAMERS and the APS TARC is a project of the U.S. Administration for Community Living, Administration on Aging, Department of Health and Human Services, and administered by WRMA Incorporated. Contractors' findings, conclusions, and points of view do not necessarily represent the official policy of the U.S. Administration for Community Living, Administration on Aging, Department of Health and Human Services. The webinar is being hosted by the APS TARC. We work with states to enhance the effectiveness of APS programs by supporting federal, state, and local partners' use of data and analytics, applying research and evaluation to practice, encouraging the use of innovative practices and strategies, and providing APS programs with individualized technical assistance. We're here to help APS programs in any way that we can. Just reach out to us using the contact information that will be displayed at the end of the webinar. Please use your computer speakers to access audio for this webinar, and make sure the speaker volume is adjusted to your desired level. If you experience audio problems due to internet connection speeds or hardware issues, we recommend exiting the webinar and re-entering. Everyone is muted for this webinar. You may ask questions of our presenters at any time by typing them into the questions box. We will relay as many as we can to the speakers when we pause for questions. Due to the structure of this webinar, we will hold all questions until the end. All attendees will receive an automatically generated email approximately 24 hours after the webinar ends with a link to the certificate of attendance. This webinar is being recorded, and all registrants will receive an email when the recording is made available on the APS TARC YouTube channel. Slide handouts will be available via the APS TARC website and the YouTube channel within 3 to 4 weeks. As I noted earlier, we have a large slate of speakers, so I will allow them to introduce themselves when they begin their presentations. Now I will turn this over to Carl Urban.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Carl Urban. I'm a Senior Research Manager at the Adult Protective Services Technical Assistance Resource Center, retired from the state of Texas a few years ago, APS program. Next slide, please. So I am going to try to set the context and the framework from a very broad perspective for what is going to follow. I'm going to do this very quickly, and I'm going to do this very unoriginally. For those of you that have seen some of the past workshops we've done, none of this is going to be new information for you, really. But I think this will help kind of frame what our state experts are going to talk about. So let me talk a little bit about data. Data is an important management tool. That's a big no duh, right? But there's some things you got to recognize and understand about data. You know, it's easy for us to get obsessed and caught up with the numbers, but we have to remember that data is just a means. It's not the ends to improving outcomes for our clients. It's an important means, but it's not the purpose of what we are doing. The other thing about data that we often discover is that it really doesn't necessarily answer our questions about what we need to do to improve things. Rather, it points us in a direction of asking the right questions. And this is especially true if you are only looking at one data metric. And so in the context of dashboards, it's the accumulation of lots of data that helps you get to the answers to the right questions that we want to know what we're looking at. And then the final thing here is data requires systems, it requires expertise, it requires work, it requires effort, but it's generally worth it to help us get to those answers that we want to get to. However, with data, you have always got to be careful of unintended consequences, and that is a much longer presentation than we have time for today. Next slide. So, given all that, why do we use data? We use data because we want to increase accountability. We want to measure our performance and see if it's meeting expectations. We want to use that to improve our practice. Are we meeting those expectations? If not, what can we do to then improve our program? We improve our practice, we will overall improve our program through use of performance-based or systemic analysis of performance. Next slide, please. So, if we want to use data to improve our program performance, there's a couple of things we've got to do. We have to think holistically and systemically. So how do we do that? And the three things I usually point to are tracking and trending, benchmarking, and dashboards. So we're going to talk about dashboards today. What do we mean by dashboards? Dashboards are just simply a way of consolidating and arranging numbers, metrics, and sometimes performance scorecards on a single screen. It's pulling the different pieces of data together that we need to pull together to get the big picture so that we can answer those key questions for improving our programs. Next screen, please. Next screen. Next slide, please. You always have to be aware of the potential unintended consequences, which I referenced a second ago. You don't want to focus on a particular casework practice at the expense of other important ones. The example I usually use is our case durations are too high. We have to have a priority to reduce our case durations. We're going to measure case durations. What you will find is if you're only measuring case durations and not other things, suddenly you are skimping on casework practice or you're causing other unintended consequences that you didn't mean to. Always remember with data that correlation is not causation. It points you to ask the right questions. It may not necessarily tell you the answer. And then always remember, what can't be measured isn't worth managing is not a good idea. There are things beyond data, culture, morale, etc., that you always have to be looking at beyond simply the data. So next slide. And then the final thing I'll say is, and I referenced this already, one metric is never enough. So, you know, we've been doing this study, some of you are aware of. We talked to Washington and Oklahoma specifically as we were doing this. We've been doing this study about caseload in APS. And what became very apparent from our talking to the states that have pretty sophisticated caseload, workload analysis kinds of processes is that they do what? They use dashboards. It's never one metric is enough. If you're just looking at caseload, there are ways to manipulate caseload at the worker level, at the unit level. You can't just depend on caseload. You've got to look at duration. You've got to look at a host of other things. One measure is never enough. And so that's why dashboards matter. And with that, I will turn it over to who, Leslie?
I'm going to have you turn it over to Carrie and Sarah. Thank you, Carl.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Carrie Perez. I'm the Deputy Director in North Carolina for Adult Services for the Division of Social Services at the Department of Health and Human Services. So in North Carolina, we have a state-supervised, county-administered program for adult services. Or actually, am I supposed to turn it over to introduce Sarah? So Sarah, let me turn it over to you and to do your introduction.
Hello, everyone. I am Sarah Richardson, and I am the program administrator with Adult Services here in North Carolina. And Leslie, you can go to the next slide. Okay, Carrie?
Okay. So in North Carolina, we do have a state-supervised, county-administered program for adult services, including adult protective services. On the state level, we gather data from all of our county partners, which we have 100 of them in North Carolina. And we gather that data on both a monthly and an annual basis. The numbers we have collected over the years indicate a steady increase in reported instances of APS. And during our most recent state fiscal year, our counties received a little over 34,000 reports. So the chart on the right side of the slide illustrates that in North Carolina, the older adult population surpassed the birth to 17 population in 2019. And we have seen a steady increase in the older adult population that is projected to continue to experience significant growth. And we're expecting by 2041 that the population of individuals aged 65 and over is projected to increase from 1.8 million to 2.7 million in our state, which marks a 50% increase. And then the 85 and older population will increase by 114%. And so the increase in the older adult segment of our population, combined with the increase in APS, emphasized to us the importance of how we collect data, how do we make our data useful, and then what data do we need to support this growth moving forward. And so this is where our data journey began. Next slide, please. So we knew understanding and utilizing data is not just important, but it's also imperative to the realm of continuous quality improvement when it comes to enhancing outcomes for vulnerable adults. So we wanted to make sure we were looking at that full picture. So we started looking at quantitative and qualitative data. So with the quantitative data with numerical values and statistical analysis, it offers clear metrics to understand trends and measure outcomes like the number of individuals served or incidents of specific issues or challenges, and measurable outcomes such as improvements in health or well-being. On the other hand, that qualitative data from interviews and surveys provides insight into that lived experiences and barriers also faced by the vulnerable adults that we serve. So it might reveal underlying social determinants of health, such as housing instability or a lack of social support, which influences individuals' ability to engage with services and then really to achieve those positive outcomes we're seeking. By integrating both the quantitative and that qualitative data into our continuous quality improvement process, we found that agencies can gain a comprehensive understanding of the factors contributing to the outcomes of vulnerable adults and then develop more effective strategies for improvement. Next slide. We also wanted to ensure that our decision-making was data-driven, incorporating facts, metrics, and data to inform strategic decisions aligning with our goals, objectives, and initiatives. And throughout the continuous quality improvement process, integrating data offers that rationale for decisions, and it really helps direct organizational progress. So we embraced this approach, and it had several benefits. It fostered confidence by enabling informed decisions, prompt proactive response to challenges. It leads to significant cost savings. It identified some patterns and correlations for insightful conclusions. It emphasizes data integration into decision-making processes and utilizes data visualization for that swift analysis that we were looking for. So by adopting these practices, we wanted to enhance that decision-making and then drive performance improvement effectively. Next slide. In North Carolina, our adult services continuous quality improvement cycle, we use a 4-step process we call the 4 C's. Using qualitative and quantitative data, we collect and analyze data to understand and identify priorities, strengths, and opportunities for improvement. We create and gather recommendations for solutions. We implement change for improvement. We monitor and check progress. And this is a continuous cycle that we go through with each of our 100 counties. And this is a true partnership between the state and counties to have those regular ongoing discussions around data and program evaluation that truly promotes a culture of learning and focuses on the people that we serve here in North Carolina. Next slide. So we'd like to specifically highlight our APS continuous quality improvement tool. As you can see, It's a lot of numbers on here. And as we gather information directly from counties through surveys and from our current state systems, for example, together with a county, we look at the average time to begin an APS evaluation. And in North Carolina, we do have law and policy that requires cases to be initiated within specific timeframes. So by reviewing these metrics with our county partners quarterly, we can help them focus on any areas of growth and then develop strategies to improve the services that they're providing to our citizens. So here you can see, for an example, in state fiscal year 18-19, the number of days to initiate started out at an average of 13.8. The county now has an initiation time frame of 1 day, and you can see the progress the county made over the past several years. So when concerns are identified in a county or anywhere across the state, if we're seeing those patterns and trends, we look for those root causes and identify those, and then solutions are provided, such as implementing standard operating procedures or providing targeted training to provide those positive outcomes that we're seeking. And we've seen a lot of success with this model. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Richardson.
Thanks, Carrie. And Leslie, if you'll go to the next slide, please. So what we have found is that we've had a few issues with collecting our data, which I'm sure a lot of you have as well. And so our primary issues that we have found are, the first one being the systems that we use are outdated and that they're no longer supported. Second, the different adult services programs, primarily our APS, or our Adult Protective Services, and our guardianship programs, are housed in separate systems, and that those systems don't speak to each other. And lastly, the current system that collects our APS data doesn't speak the same language as the NAMERS system does. So we knew that updating and combining our current systems would be key for both our ability to advocate for funding and for our county partners' ability to serve their citizens. So how did we do it? Leslie, if you'll go to the next slide, please. The first step was by meeting with our departmental leadership here in North Carolina, which is our Department of Health and Human Services. We also met with our legal and our IT departments, and we also met with our Office of Contracts, Procurements, and Grants. We worked on the document that you see now on the PowerPoint slide, which is our business and technical requirement chart. The program staff with our IT division worked with us as the business owner to help create functional processes that the new system would need to have based on the processes of our current system. These charts were actually included in our request for quote, or RFQ, that was submitted to the potential vendors. Leslie, if you'll go to the next slide, please. So you'll see here another data process diagram that we used. We also worked with our business analyst from our IT division to also create specific process diagrams as well. This first example is our current intake process diagram for our guardianship system. Leslie, if you'll go to the next one, please. And this slide has the example of our current intake process diagram for our APS system. Both of these diagram examples were included with the RFQ documentation, and they were also included with the information packet that was submitted with our RFQ. If you'll go to the next slide, please, Leslie. So just to wrap this all up, in North Carolina, we knew that updating our systems was a smaller part of the larger picture for APS improvement for North Carolina. So we've actually included a copy of what we refer to as our roadmap, because it shows how we're actually using that adult services data for the important work of APS improvement. And so, Leslie, I will turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you. You can see on the screen our Carrie and Sarah's contact information if you want to contact them directly with questions. And at this time, we're going to turn it over to Dave.
Thank you very much. Well, greetings, I'm Dave Beecham with the Washington State Adult Protective Services. Before I begin speaking about our data dashboards, I'm going to share a little information about our APS structure for context. So next slide. So APS in Washington State is a state-run program as a division of the Aging and Long-Term Support Administration under the Department of Social and Health Services. APS in Washington State has our headquarters in Olympia, Washington, with field services managed within 3 geographically distinct regions. We have over 600 staff, 425 of which are frontline investigators. Next slide. So the APS regions, as shown on this map, break the state down by a natural east-west geographical delineation created by the Cascade Mountain Range. West of the mountains, a north-south delineation is made using the Puget Sound. These 3 regional delineations correspond to the numerical values displayed here and are used for many of our high-level data analytics. Next slide. So the data we use is collected directly from our case management system called TIVA2, which is a non-proprietary system developed by the Aging and Long-Term Support Administration using an interface net framework shared across multiple administrations applications, which allows us ease of cross-application data sharing and integration. The database updates with the previous day's activities from the TIVA2 system after business hours, and some level of that data is then available to all APS staff via 3 interface resources. An Excel cube reader called Data Mart, a Power BI dashboard for investigators and managers, and a Power BI manager's dashboard with reports for our division's strategic measures, all 3 of which I'll be discussing briefly today. Next slide. So first, the Data Mart. Data Mart is a cube reader in a prearranged, curated library of data accessible via a drag and drop pivot table in Excel. Even though it functions through an Excel interface, the data sits on a server, not on a spreadsheet, until it's queried via the pivot tables. This means the data is not editable within the Data Mart, so users can access and arrange but not edit the information as they need. Data fields are grouped related to specific TIVA2 systems and areas such as intake, investigation, and due process. Now, from the Data Mart interface, report templates can also be created, saved, and updated with enhanced features, such as workbook level filters and timeline slicers. This allows all users to pull reports regularly and with very little effort. The Data Mart system brings in almost every data element and dimension from our TIVA2 system. But as the program needs arise or as our TIVA2 system is improved, we bring in those new data elements. Let's go ahead and look at a Data Mart interface functionality. Next slide. All right, so this may look familiar to many of you. The Data Mart basically works the same as an Excel pivot table, allowing available data points feeding in from our TIVA2 to be organized as needed for reporting. Many of the data dimensions also have multiple ways to view the data, such as here, we're listing individual allegations related to intakes as individual lines for each allegation. However, we could also view these allegations as a comma delineated list if needed. The example here of how data can be sorted is filters, columns, and rows, and then we identify how that data can be summarized as a value. And for this example, we're going to be summarizing the data as a count. Next slide. So by selecting the filter value dropdowns, the data can then be sorted as needed. In this example, selected from the pivot table, it's filtered to show the number of allegations associated with intakes created by the HQ region, our centralized intake, in 2023. Next slide. In this example, that same data from the previous slide is grouped by allegation type instead of by specific allegation. This is particularly helpful as we have allegation definitions which have changed over time, and we often only want general information on the allegations reported. Next slide. Second way we access our data is via Power BI reports. We use the Data Mart tables to feed to the Power BI reports, which allows Washington APS to track specific data from our target measures, which include data on the number of investigations assigned, timely initial responses, the first time we see the AV for an interview, 90-day closures, and case note timeliness. Filters allow for sorting data in the same manner as the data mart, but then provides a graphical display of the selected data points. Next slide. So for example, this Power BI chart is a count of APS investigations assigned to each of our 3 regions from June 2023 to December 2023. So we can quickly and easily see our work distribution in an easy to read graphical format. And these reports can then be sorted down all the way down to the worker level. Next slide. Here is a breakdown of the reason code for investigations remaining open over 90 days for that same time period of June through December of 2023. Again, this data can be broken down to a regional, office, unit, or individual investigation level as needed. Next slide. The third way we view our data is with a data dashboard. The Power BI Investigator Data Dashboard is available to all of our investigators, supervisors, and managers, showing real-time data related to their current investigations, including alleged victim and perpetrator demographics, allegations under investigation, the initial face-to-face visit due dates and previous attempts, date of the last case note entered, days that the investigation has been open, and if the investigation is pending approval by a supervisor for completion. Next slide. So here's an example of what a small section of the Investigator Dashboard looks like. The Power BI Investigator Dashboard provides hyperlink access to the TIVA 2 system for any actionable items. So if an investigator sees where an initial face-to-face interview is due, where a case note hasn't been entered, or other actionable items, they simply click the hyperlink that's outlined in red there on the left, and it takes them to that piece of work. Next slide. The Power BI Investigator Dashboard also provides data on investigations created and closed month to month. So here's a 6-month look back on received and closed investigations for an individual investigator. The same data can be pulled by a supervisor for their entire unit, by a program manager for their offices, at the regional level for the regional administrators, or at headquarters we can pull statewide data for reporting needs. Next slide. The Power BI Investigator Dashboard also provides data on meeting the required initial face-to-face timeliness. This is one of our strategic measures, and by hovering over any point of the data trend lines, it will display the percentage of how many initial face-to-face visits were completed within that priority timeline. Notice there is a line at the 95% mark, which notes our strategic measures benchmark. So people can know at any given point whether they're meeting our strategic measures or not. Next slide. The Power BI Investigator Dashboard also provides data on investigations created and closed month to month. Here is the data for this investigator's findings breakdown on closed investigations for 2023. Next slide. The Power BI Investigator Dashboard also provides a breakdown of data on investigations findings. Here is the summary data for an investigator's allegation findings on closed investigations for 2023. And notice at the bottom right of this chart that we also pull out the substantiated non-self-neglect findings for comparison to the substantiation total. Next chart. So as protective services are one of our most important parts of adult protective services, the Power BI Investigator Dashboard shows a numerical and graphical display of what services are being offered, accepted, and completed during investigation. And this allows us to easily review what services are being utilized and identify possible service gaps across the state. So there we go. That's APS State of Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. We are going to turn it over to Jeremy Buchanan and Reza Zainulpour, and they are going to provide a live demo of their dashboard system. So we're going to have to take a second to transition to that. And Andy, I think, is going to take care of that for me.
I think, Leslie, they're going to speak for a little bit and then give me a cue when it's time.
That's correct. My apologies. Jeremy and Reza.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremy Buchanan. I'm the Director of our Community Living, Aging, and Protective Services programs in Oklahoma. I've been in this role for a little over 4 years. Before I introduce Reza, I'm just going to talk a little bit about our data journey and why it was so important. when I first came on as director of Adult Protective Services, it was a failing program. We had over 14,000 items that were in backlog. These are referrals from the community that were unaddressed, that were not initiated timely, that were not finished. 14,000 things that we'd had for over 60 days. So we had a real challenge. First, we had the challenge of backlog, but when you look at the root cause of why that was occurring, we were receiving a lot more work than we could close. We were able to close about 77 referrals for every 100 we received. New people were coming on, they were getting handed, massive caseloads. It was creating a lot of burnout. We had extremely high turnover. We had about over 20% of our workforce was vacant at any given time. So we had all these challenges, and so we had a transformation in front of us. I believe data is so important. You have to be able to see the problem, to focus on the problem and attack it. And so my first order of business was to create that visibility and for all of us to talk about these metrics daily. And that's why we built our APS system. So if we can go ahead and share it.
No, he's going to get something will pop up on our screen.
All right, are we ready to turn the screen over, Reza, or you have a little more?
Go ahead and allow us to share, please.
All righty, I will make you the presenter. You'll have a prompt on your screen to share your computer screen.
Okay.
Take your time. All right, we can see
is it visible?
Yeah, looks good.
Awesome. So this is one of our first dashboards that we created. You'll notice we still have backlog. We'll never be down to zero. There's always cases that just take a little longer, but we are trying to still work that down to what we call, the backlog that is acceptable. Some of this is still things where we're still trying to catch up, but we started at 14,000. So us being down to 764 is really quite an achievement. And in the time that we have been working down the backlog, we've seen referrals spike. I think as some of you mentioned in your other data, there's a lot more people in our community who are getting older. We're getting more referrals. Just to kind of paint that picture, in 2019, we had less than 19,000 referrals, and we're on pace to hit 33,000 this year. So just in the last 5 years, that's an increase, nearly doubling the number of referrals that we're receiving. So that's creating more capacity challenges. But on this dashboard, you can see open referrals and backlog. But down here is kind of the information we captured to talk about capacity. We have referrals closed in the last 30 days and new referrals in the last 30 days. If we're unable to close at least as many referrals as we're receiving, then we're falling further behind. And so these dashboards helped us track that metric and make sure that we were addressing the challenge of just keeping up. Obviously, we've made a lot of progress. So pretty much every month, we're closing more referrals than we're receiving. As you go down here, you can see we have referrals closed by month and created by month. For month by month, going back several years. This is kind of how you can see in these referrals created by month that it's just gradually increasing. And it's been doing that pretty rapidly since 2019. The thing I love about our dashboards too, and I know some of you talked about using filters, being able to drill in. We are able to drill in and see, for example, a supervisory group. We can look by district, response type, referral source, drill into a supervisory group, and this updates in real time. It's all real-time data. So as our people out there in the field are working, these dashboards are updated, and so when you open them, you're getting real-time data, and you can drill into it. So here is for just one unit. We can see they still have 76 backlog in that unit. They have 217 total cases, and you can see what they have received in the last 30 days and what they've closed in the last 30 days. They've got a couple of new employees, so you can see here there's a pretty good distribution, even distribution of performance by worker. ranging from 19 to 11 here in the middle. And then you've got a couple of new workers, and I think one that is primarily works on guardianships that has a lower number. So there, again, data helps you to ask questions. I know when we first rolled out these dashboards, there was a lot of concern. It's a little bit of a culture shock with our people because you can use data in the wrong way. So we've really tried to build a supportive coaching framework around this data and focus not on how many did you close, you know, why wasn't this done on time, and focus more on the daily activities that people need to be doing to get these metrics to change. One of our big focus areas, when we kind of pulled a whole bunch of data from closed cases and we evaluated the quality and the timeliness, we found that the least common denominator, the strongest relationship to improving quality and closing things quickly is your time to documentation. So I'm going to switch over to another dashboard. This is the dashboard we're using in our monthly performance meetings now. We've kind of pivoted because this is helping us address our challenges a little bit deeper. So you can notice this APS average time to documentation for the entire state is 1.74. I can tell you when we first started focusing on this metric, it was around
22.
Yeah, it was at 22 days. We had a lot of people who were doing interviews, capturing things in a notepad, and then waiting to document when they would close the case. Well, one thing that I know is that you can't close a case that has no documentation. So it is kind of an intuitive thing that if you document in real time, you're going to be able to move quicker. But this has really played out as we focused on that metric. Time to documentation has come down dramatically, and we've seen average time to closure come down dramatically, and our ability to do more come down dramatically. And it also, I think, has given our workers who've done it. Initially, it was like tough, right, to get them to focus on just putting your documentation in as close to real time as you can. But as we focused on that, people have realized they feel a weight lifted off of them because they're not leaving a whole bunch of work undone. All they have to do is focus on the work that they have to do that day and the work that's ahead, and look at the triggers, notifications in our system for what they need to be focusing on. I'm going to turn it over to Reza and let him introduce himself, and he will take it over from here and share a little bit more.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, everyone. I'm Reza Zanelpour. I'm one of Jeremy's deputies here at CAP in Oklahoma. Some additional things that I wanted to talk about on this one specifically, right? The number of metrics that you have make it easier to digest for all your folks. Sure, you can take everything that you have, but when you make it simple and easy to understand, the easier it is for everybody to digest. So when you look at it, this is simple supply and demand, right? I have this many coming in, 1394. This is what I had last month, real time. This is how many went out, 1446. We're meeting demand. Okay, so that means we're doing pretty darn good. Does that mean we can do better or not? In our opinion, we can always do better. So whenever we look at all of the opportunities here, right? How many cases were assigned per individual worker? Are we happy with that balance? This allows us to ask the right question. Do we have our lines drawn effectively, right? When we look at the referrals closed per month, is this appropriate based on what we know their skill set to be? I mean, we have an overtime program in place, so we can see like super high numbers right now. But we have, again, overtime programs in place because the data shows that it supports our need to do the activity and therefore get us closer to our goal. When you look at all of these, right, these are average times for cases to closure, right? Every supervisor has their entire team, and every single one of their team members have additional opportunities to come up with creative ways to impact our processes in the future. So for instance, these ones are guardianships, but all of these other ones, right? These are all opportunities. The average time of this individual's referrals for time to closure on investigation was 315 days. I'm not going to click on this bar because this takes us to the actual cases that the individual worked. But in those cases, we can start pulling up the ones that were the longest and say, you know, what were the challenges that you encountered as you progressed through this case? And now we're talking about very specific things in the process that allows them to say, this part was not easy, or I got stuck here. And now that gives us the opportunity to implement other things such as standard work. I heard that announced earlier by, I believe it was Carrie. But implement actual tools that will help alleviate the specific concern, therefore giving us one more drop in the bucket to be more successful the next time it comes through. And when we're successful at one place, we ask ourselves, how can we replicate this? Can this go statewide? How many times do we encounter this? And again, this time for documentation here, 1.74, how do I impact this? I don't need to go talk to the folks down here at the bottom. And we're not against these numbers being high. We are super supportive of the truth. So whenever these numbers are up high, we're like, hey, great job getting those old case notes in there. That's what we want to see, because data can be gamed, and if we allow it to happen, then we promote the wrong behavior.
I also want to point out, like for those of you who've worked in APS, our target date for closing a case is 60 days. All of these that are on the high end, because this starts with the high end to the low end, there's probably a mix of guardianship cases. We do have quite a few long-term guardianship cases in Oklahoma. So if you have a case you've had for several years, you know, and you've closed that case this month, it's going to drive your average up. So but it's the data that when you see this data and you have a question about it, you're able to click in it and you can see those nuances. You have a lot of times it's explained for you when you click in there and you see what occurred. But if there are questions you need to ask, it allows us to ask the right questions so that we can start to move forward. And like I said, our goal is always to support people to do better and to do that through what we do each day, and not to focus on, well, why is it taking so long? Why is this number not where we want it to be? We just want them, we know that if we get them doing the things that are important to do every day, all these numbers fall into place.
And one of the challenges that you have is obviously, well, it's typically a lack of resources, right? We don't have all the resources to do all the things in the world. But you know, our team members, they come to us with ideas, and they want to know that their ideas are creative and they can accomplish something, right? So say for instance somebody brings to you a specific training. You say, well, what is that training target? And they say it helps, for instance, sexual abuse. Well, you can go back and you can start having a conversation with them to say, okay, well, how many sexual abuse cases did we have in the past quarter, in the past year? And you can look at the frequency with which something happened, and then you can say, hey, so if we do this training, what do you think the impact's going to be, right? Is it going to increase our quality so much? Is it going to reduce our speed, you know, so much, or reduce the amount of time it takes to completion? Or, you know, if you look at here at our allegation dashboard, you can see all the referrals that come in, all the allegations that we receive. And whenever you can visualize the information in this way, we received 3.8 thousand cases on self-neglect last quarter. Okay, so how do we improve our time to self-neglect? If we work on that and reduce the time per day on self-neglect cases by 1 day, just 1 day, even if we were to take sexual abuse cases and make them be 0 days, and I'm not saying that both aren't noble goals, but whenever you're looking at improving the effectiveness of your entire program and really making an impact on how can I grow us the smartest way, how can I make the biggest impact, this allows you to better frame what we need to focus on, and therefore when you tell your team what you need to focus on, you have all their eyes looking at the same location. So again, this is just a great way for us to ask questions, better focus our whole team on one thing at a time, and therefore make an impact one day at a time. Some other questions that were asked, and I know we're running quick on time. Our dashboards are available to every single person on our team. We think that everybody should have access to the data. And while there's plenty of culture things that you have to focus on prior to, you're right, because a lot of times people look at dashboards and they look at, you know, right here and they're like, why didn't you close cases? We cannot look at any cases like that. Everybody that's on this call knows that every case is different, right? There's easy cases, there's hard cases. The way that we have to continue to work with our teams is looking at things from an average standpoint, right? So on average, we get about 10 to 15 cases a month. Some are easy, some are hard, but on average, we have to have our supervisors start looking at the capacity, because again, we always have to look at how many do we have, or how many did we get, and how many do we have to close. And when we better understand that, and we better understand the resources that we have, and we look at the information and can ask targeted questions, we can get to where we need to be. And I will turn it back over to Andrew, because I know we're shorter on time than we're supposed to be. So thank you.
All right, Leslie, I will make you the presenter again.
Okay, we are ready for questions. Make sure I'm showing the right screen. There we go. Okay, we do have a couple of questions for our panelists. I want to thank everyone for their presentations today. And I want to get to these really quick so we can have as much time as possible to respond. So this one was for Jeremy and Reza. How was the transition to launching Salesforce? Compare the previous system versus Salesforce, please.
Launching Salesforce, you know, I started 4 years ago, 4 years ago, 2 days ago. So 4 years and 2 days. The day I started was the day we were told that we're going live in like 2.5 months. So it was very hot, it was very fast, and we didn't have all of our processes identified yet. Jeremy had also started recently before me. You know, in our background, we had a lot of process knowledge of how the system should flow, but we didn't necessarily have the deep knowledge of every single APS process mapped out the way we would have liked. So we did use a lot of SME knowledge initially, and we got our processes pretty ironed out, and we made a successful system. Could it have been a little bit better? Absolutely, with what we know now. And I will say it wasn't without its challenges. Our old system had data stored in a way that didn't make it easy to transfer everything out. So when we were transferring to Salesforce, we did have a few challenges there. And there's always going to be some resistance to change. But right now, almost nobody remembers anything good about the last system. I mean, again, our last system, the data that we had, we couldn't even trust it. We could not use it because it didn't tell us what we needed. And so whenever I started and I started figuring that out, it was easy to create the message to say, here's why we need a change.
I will say too, I don't recommend implementing a new system and with a 2.5 month time frame. That was a rough 2.5 months. But if we could have had a little bit more planning time, we'd had a little bit better start out of the gate. We are currently, we just got a vendor for some enhancements that are going to, basically some of the low-hanging fruit that's going to improve just the user interfaces, the human-centered design for our people in the field. It's going to address their core issues. And then we love our system, though. I think everybody's pretty appreciative of the power that it gives us to see and then to do what needs to be done.
Okay, thank you. Another question, I think this is for everyone. Would love to hear comments on what problems they may have experienced in getting effective use of data and what they have done to improve on that. For example, the unintended poor impacts.
So this is Reza. I'll take a couple. So we very much we'll try to think ahead of time of what the impact of the data collection process looks like. We very much want all the work to do work for us. So every step of the process is a needed portion of the investigation process or intake process or something. And then we try to use the information as it's collected and then make it display in a way that satisfies the need of our organization. So we try to limit the need for the team member to do anything additional. So for instance, one of the challenges that we inadvertently put on ourselves initially whenever we started our system, we created what we call tasks, or what the system calls tasks. And tasks are something that you have to click on and sign off when they're complete. Well, there's already portions of the work that kind of signify that. So for instance, we're supposed to initiate cases timely. And so we have a task that will ding if we didn't complete it on time. So there's other ways to do that without needing a task to be there. And the task creates extra clicks for the worker, and therefore our compliance on completion of the task isn't as good as it ought to be. However, completion of the work is done because there is a specific note type that is an initial interview that does the same thing. So again, there were some things, and we're working on improving those in our next phase. Everything, I mean, again, everything we look at says, how do we benefit the front line to not have to do more work or make the work do the work for us?
Carrie, Sarah, or Dave, do you have anything you want to add to that question? Again, what problems you may have experienced in getting effective use of data and what you have done to improve that?
So we are still, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so with the state of Washington, with our data dashboards and such, the biggest thing we've run up against is just getting people to use them and be aware of their use and how they can benefit them. People are busy, our investigators are busy, and so encouraging them to use their data dashboard to track their work has taken some time to really get people to utilize the resource we developed in a consistent way to be of value. And so it's sort of a constant battle of training and encouraging people to go out and look at the data dashboard versus just use the system. Although we're trying to integrate the dashboard in a way that's easier to access from our system, which should help. That's been our biggest thing, is just getting people to use the tools.
Carrie?
And this is Carrie from North Carolina. I think definitely agree with what everyone has stated so far. In North Carolina, because we are kind of looking still for our systems, we're in the process of that RFQ and several red lines back and forth between that vendor. But what we're looking at, one of the things we're looking at for our new system is where have those data gaps been and how do we fill it and make it more user friendly for our frontline workers, and then also leadership. Like, what is it that they're wanting to see and get out of that, and look at ways to automate those processes as we're doing some of those process diagrams.
Thank you. Okay, we have two questions that are similar, and so I'm going to kind of combine them. And one question was, if my program is interested in doing this on a limited budget, where would you suggest we start? And the other was, what is the annual cost to run your dashboard? So, anyone want to tackle that one?
I don't have an annual cost to run, but I mean, we have within our agency, we have dedicated data units, people that we work with Adult Protective Services that do this agency-wide. So we have a queue where we say, here's the thing we want built, and then we have people that are designated FTEs that do all that. I couldn't tell you how many there are, but
okay.
It's a big part of what we do in the state is we understand the importance of data, and so they have full-time people doing it and helping us build these things.
So it's within your operating costs.
Indeed.
Okay. Anyone else want to do that?
This is Reza from Oklahoma. So one way that I might look at tackling that problem isn't necessarily from the initial cost investment. Well, I mean, you'll definitely need that information. But when you look at what your current operating costs are, and then, look at, say, for instance, again, we use Salesforce. So the license costs are a specific amount, and it's based very much on what you want to do. And you could probably get some demos and some rough estimates on license costs by searching online, but you should look at it from the standpoint of, I have this many cases and this many workers, and this is the cost of our computer system, and kind of look at the total cases that you receive annually, and look at, a cost per case, look with what you can accomplish, and then kind of game out what that would look like if you had a different system with a projected cost. So again, our license costs are, relatively expensive, but because Salesforce is a web base and once it was built, we now only have the annual license costs as opposed to any other costs. So it's cheaper than our previous system. I will say that.
That's a long way of saying, this is Jeremy from Oklahoma, of saying if you have a system that improves your efficiency by 10% in your workforce, for us, we have about 120 employees. That's 12 salaried positions that I know in Oklahoma we're not going to get, but our system has allowed us to gain the capacity of 12 people. So I think you got to look at it from all those angles about what's the cost benefit.
That's a great perspective to speak to it from. Thank you. Again, in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of blend some ideas from a couple of different questions. One was about what staff within your agencies have access to the dashboards, and the other was, is your dashboard public facing? And I'd like everyone to answer that, please.
So Dave, here I'll start from Washington. So for our staff within Adult Protective Services, everyone has access to some level of data. Again, the investigators have their dashboard with their open investigations. Supervisors and managers have access to the dashboard for their units and for their regions. And then our data mart is available to supervisors and above. Line staff don't have access, investigators don't have access to that directly. So everyone has some level of access to the data relative to their work responsibilities. But none of ours is public facing. Although we do provide a yearly data summary in a public facing document.
Thank you.
In Oklahoma, our dashboards are available to everyone. Our dashboard and reporting is available to anyone. We are currently through kind of a third party looking at creating executive dashboards for the entire agency, which I know there's a long-term vision of making those our public-facing dashboards. So we've exported some data out of Salesforce that could end up being public.
But it's not currently public, is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. Currently, it is not.
Okay.
Specifically, there are some things that I would love to make public, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I would love to see, we recommend for prosecution to the DA. I would love to see for our jurisdictions across the state, the percent of cases we recommend for prosecution that they act on. We refer things to the health department for action. I would like to see the percent of cases referred for action that they act on. I mean, to me, those are powerful public metrics that hopefully are a powerful mirror to get action around elder justice issues that we see challenges with every day.
Interesting point. Carrie, would you like to speak to that question about?
Sure. In North Carolina, we do publish an annual report that we pull out certain metrics and report on those. But most of our metrics are just internal for our 100 county DSSs in the state.
Okay, thank you. And looking at the time, I don't think the other questions that I've seen are going to lend themselves to a brief response. So I'm going to wrap this up. And again, anyone who wants to have more information, this webinar recording will be available soon, as well as the handouts. I want to thank our presenters today, Sarah, Carrie, Dave, Reza, and Jeremy, and Carl, my colleague Carl, for sharing your information and taking the time to do this with us. Please reach out to the APS TARC using the contact information on this slide if you have any additional questions. And again, keep an eye out for the certificate of attendance email and the opportunity to do an evaluation on this webinar. And to our presenters, I did neglect to mention that there was one comment in the question fields that said great presentation. So thank you all very much for your attendance and have a great rest of your day.
Be well, thank you.